The metal boot came down like a hydraulic press, crushing the red and gold breastplate until the arc reactor flickered and died. Sparks showered the concrete floor of the server room, illuminating the monster standing above the fallen hero. Atom Smasher was not a man. He was a walking tank of military-grade chrome, and he was laughing. Underneath the crushing weight, Tony Stark gasped for air, his nanotech bleeding out like liquid mercury that had forgotten how to hold its shape. He had no armor left, no fortune, no Avengers on speed dial. Just a dying mercenary and a gun that wouldn't stop talking. "This is the moment I thought we were dead," a voice whispered in the darkness. V's voice, rough with smoke and exhaustion. "We were just two glitches in the system. A billionaire from another dimension, a suit made of trash, and a city that eats heroes for breakfast. But legends aren't written when the armor is shiny. They are written when the only thing left to burn is your own soul." This is the story of what happens when Tony Stark crashes into Night City with 72 hours to rebuild hope from a pile of scrap. Welcome to KBDC. Can a man who builds the future survive a city trapped in the past? Subscribe now to see the upgrade, because the revolution is just beginning. 72 hours earlier. The Badlands smelled of sulfur and old tires. It was a chemical silence, the kind that hung heavy over the heaps of discarded refuse stretching out toward the horizon. The sky above was a bruised purple bleeding into the jagged neon glow of Night City in the distance. V sat on the hood of the battered Archer Hella, staring at the lights of the skyline. The headache was back. It started at the base of the skull, a dull throb that quickly sharpened into a drill, boring through the brainstem. V popped a jagged pill, dry swallowing it, with a grimace. It didn't stop the pain, but it quieted the ghost. Pathetic. A voice glitched into existence beside V. Johnny Silverhand leaned against the car, his digital form flickering like bad reception. He took a drag from a cigarette that didn't exist. "You're staring at the city like it's gonna apologize. It won't. It just wants to chew you up and spit out the gristle." "Shut up, Johnny," V muttered, rubbing tired eyes. "I'm just waiting for the contact. A simple drop. Easy eddies. Nothing's easy in the dark future, kid. You're dying. I'm the tumor. And we're out here playing fetch for spare parts." The sky tore open. It wasn't a storm. It was a sonic boom that rattled the rusted chassis of the car. V looked up just in time to see a streak of red fire scream across the purple clouds. It didn't move like an aerodyne. It moved like a meteor. The object slammed into the trash dunes a mile east, sending up a mushroom cloud of debris and dust. The shockwave hit them seconds later, knocking the half-lit cigarette out of V's mouth, if it had been real. Johnny whistled a low, static-filled sound. Well, that didn't look like a scheduled landing. V was already sliding into the driver's seat, the engine of the Hella roaring to life with a cough of black smoke. "Salvage," V said, slamming the car into gear. Whatever hit the ground that hard might be worth something. The crash site was a crater of fused glass and burning plastic. The heat was intense enough to singe eyebrows from 20 yards away. V stepped out of the car, hand hovering over the Unity pistol, holstered at the hip. The scanner in V's optic eye whirred, trying to identify the wreckage. Unknown alloy. Unknown energy signature. No match found in database. In the center of the smoking pit lay a man. He wasn't wearing generic corpo suits or scavenger rags. He was encased in a fragmented undersuit of black mesh and hexagonal circuitry, but the armor plating was gone, stripped away by the friction of entry. He wasn't moving. V slid down the side of the crater, boots crunching on glass. "Hey, you alive down there?" The man gasped a desperate, rattling intake of air. His eyes snapped open. They weren't modified with optics. They were brown human and frantic. He tried to sit up, clutching his chest. A triangular device glowed softly under his shirt, flickering with an erratic rhythm. Friday, the man rasped, tapping the side of his head. Status. Where? Where are we? A synthetic voice, barely audible, leaked from a damaged earpiece. Location unknown, boss. Star charts do not match. Atmosphere is breathable but highly toxic. Nanotech stores are at 0%. Synthesis required. The man slumped back, staring up at the smog-choked sky. Great. 0%. That's a new record. He looked at V, his gaze sharpening instantly. You. Where am I? Is this Jersey, please? Tell me this isn't Jersey. V frowned, keeping the pistol lowered, but ready. You're in the Badlands. Outside Night City. You hit the ground hard, Chumbata. You a Corpo Night City. The man sat up, wincing. He looked at the horizon, at the towering monoliths of steel and hologram that pierced the smog. Never heard of it, and I've heard of everything. He tapped the glowing triangle on his chest again. Friday scanned the local networks. Passive only. Don't fry what's left of the processor. Scan initiated, the AI whispered. Suddenly the roar of engines cut through the wind. Not one car, three. Heavy modified trucks with spikes welded to the bumpers and floodlights blindingly bright. Scavs V hissed, grabbing the stranger's arm. We gotta move. Now. The man stumbled to his feet, swaying. Scavengers like raccoons, or the shoot-you-in-the-face kind, the kind that strip you for parts while you're still screaming. V said, dragging him toward the slope of the crater. Move, they didn't make it. The trucks crested the ridge, blocking the exit. 6 figures jumped out, their bodies modified with mismatched rusty cybernetics. Their eyes glowed red in the gloom. One of them, a brute, with a hydraulic claw for a jaw, racked a shotgun. Well, the leader gargled, his voice modulated into a deep bass. Fresh meat fell from the sky. And V the Merc, 2 for 1. Tony Stark straightened up. He was swaying, battered and unarmed, but his posture shifted. The arrogance returned, a mask sliding into place. Gentlemen, Tony said, holding up a hand. I assume we can negotiate. I don't have cash, but I have a very expensive watch somewhere in the ionosphere. Grab him, the leader grunted. Cut the tech out of his chest first. Looks like gold. Bad idea, Tony muttered. He glanced at V. I need a battery. Anything with a charge. V fired 2 shots, taking one scav in the knee, but they were pinned. I'm a little busy. The arm, Tony pointed to a severed cyber arm, lying in the trash heap near V's feet, a discarded piece of junk metal with exposed wiring. Throw me the arm. V didn't ask questions. V kicked the heavy metal limb into the air. Tony caught it with his left hand. In one fluid motion, Tony ripped a bundle of wires from his own wrist cuff and jammed them into the exposed port of the severed cyberarm. Friday, reroute all auxiliary power. Bypass the safety. Dump it all into the capacitor. Boss, that is unstable, the AI warned. Story of my life. The scav leader charged, the shotgun raising. Tony leveled the severed arm like a cannon. The junk metal began to whine, a high-pitched scream of overloading electronics. Blue light leaked from the seams of the arm, blindingly bright. Crack, coom. A beam of raw, unrefined repulsor energy exploded from the palm of the severed arm. It wasn't the clean, focused beam of Iron Man. It was a jagged, lightning-like discharge. It hit the lead truck, blowing the engine block clean out the back and flipping the vehicle into the air. The shockwave knocked the other scavs off their feet. The severed arm in Tony's hand melted, instantly glowing red hot. He dropped it with a curse, shaking his singed fingers. Okay, Tony breathed, looking at the burning wreckage. That was a little louder than expected. V stared at him, eyes wide. You just turned trash into a cannon. I'm an engineer, Tony said, breathless. Now can we get out of here before they realize I'm out of ammo? The drive back to the city was tense. Tony sat in the passenger seat of the Hella, tinkering with a broken datapad he'd found in the glove box. Johnny Silverhand sat in the back, invisible to Tony, leaning forward between the seats. "He's dangerous," Johnny said, glaring at the back of Tony's head. "I don't like him. He smells like Arasaka Tower on a payday." "He saved our skins," V whispered. "Talking to yourself?" Tony asked, not looking up. "Or do you have a co-pilot I can't see?" V hesitated. "Something like that." Tony paused. He pulled a small pen-like scanner from his belt, miraculously intact, and pointed it at V. A fan of blue light swept over V's face. Tony froze. He looked at the readout, then at V, his expression shifting from curiosity to horror. "You have two neural signatures," Tony said softly, "overlapping, competing." "Tell him to mind his own business," Johnny growled. Tony tapped the scanner, his face pale. "This code, it's rewriting your neural pathways. It's aggressive. It's not just data, it's consciousness transfer. Who did this to you?" V gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. "Arasaka. It's called the Relic. It's killing me." Tony looked out the window as they passed the massive holographic walls of Night City. He saw the advertisements live forever. "Secure your soul." The slogans of the Secure Your Soul program. "Soul Killer." Tony whispered the word, tasting like ash. They figured out how to digitize a human consciousness, and they're selling it. "They're storing it," V said, "like files in a database. A prison called Mikoshi." Tony's jaw tightened. The playfulness was gone. This wasn't just another villain of the week. This was an industrial-scale violation of the one thing Tony believed was sacred: the mind. The self. "Great," Johnny said, appearing on the dashboard now. "Another corpo. They collect souls in bottles." V. "Just like Jackie. You think this guy cares? He's probably taking notes so he can patent it." V flinched at the name. Jackie. The memory of him bleeding out in the back of a Delamain cab hit V like a physical blow. The promise to make it to the big leagues. The chip slotting into V's head. The silence where a best friend's laugh used to be. "I don't want to be a legend," V said quietly, more to the road than to Tony. "I just want to live. Open a small food stall. Maybe in Japantown. Somewhere quiet." Tony watched V. He saw the tremor in the hands, the exhaustion in the posture. He saw a kid carrying the weight of the world and a ghost in the machine. "I can fix it," Tony said. V glanced over. "What, the chip, the relic?" Tony said, his voice firm. "I can't stop it yet, but I can analyze it. I can figure out how to untangle you from whoever is in the back seat. But I need a lab. I need tools. And I need raw materials." "I don't have a lab," V said. "I have a ripper doc who owes me a favor and a garage full of junk." Tony smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile. "Junk. I built my first suit in a cave with a box of scraps. If you can get me access to a soldering iron and a pile of Militech garbage, I can give you a fighting chance." They pulled into the alley behind Victor Vector's clinic. The rain had started to fall, an oily drizzle that coated everything in slick darkness. Inside the clinic, the air smelled of antiseptic and ozone. Victor, a burly man with kind eyes and cybernetic arms, looked from V to the stranger in the ruined mesh suit. Victor sighed. "You look like hell, and you brought a stray." "He's not a stray," V said, helping Tony sit on the operating chair. "He's a mechanic." Tony looked around the clinic. He picked up a pair of optical pliers, testing the weight. He looked at the monitors displaying V's degrading neural intricate web. He looked at the biomonitor showing the aggressive overwrite of the relic. Johnny materialized next to the chair, crossing his arms. "He's selling you a dream, V. I've seen guys like him. They promise the moon and deliver a crater." Tony looked right at the space where Johnny was standing, almost as if he could sense the electromagnetic disturbance. "I'm not selling a dream," Tony murmured, picking up a shard of scrap metal from a bin. He turned it over in his hands, his mind already racing, visualizing the schematics, the power flow, the architecture of survival. I'm engineering a solution. There's a difference. I need access to the city's subnet, Tony told V. And I need heavy plating. Titanium carb plasteel, whatever you can steal from a scrapyard. The nano units are dead. We're going to have to do this the old-fashioned way. V leaned against the doorframe, watching the billionaire genius dismantle a microwave, just to see the magnetron. For the first time in weeks, the crushing weight of the death sentence felt a milligram lighter. The old-fashioned way, V asked. Tony held up a coil of copper wire and a spark plug. His eyes reflected the neon blue of the clinic's screens. Yeah, Tony said. Welding torches, hammers, grease. We're going to build something that doesn't just survive this city, V. We're going to build something that breaks it. He looked at the pile of Militech scrap in the corner. I can work with this. The garage behind Victor's clinic had become a forge. For 12 hours, the air had been thick with the smell of burning ozone and grinding metal. It wasn't the sterile white room manufacturing of Stark Industries. This was dirty, desperate engineering. V sat on a stack of tires, watching the billionaire work. Tony Stark had stripped off his ruined undersuit to the waist, his chest glowing with the soft blue rhythm of the unibeam sweat streaking through the grease on his skin. He was moving with a manic energy welding plates of stolen Militech cargo loader armor onto a chassis that looked less like a suit and more like a walking tank. It's ugly, V said, tossing an empty nutrient pouch into a bin. It's industrial chic, Tony corrected, not looking up from the welding torch. Sparks cascaded over his safety goggles. And it's not designed to look good on a magazine cover. It's designed to walk through a wall. He killed the torch. The suit stood in the center of the room, suspended by heavy chains. It was bulky, raw, and unpainted, a Frankenstein monster of mismatched steel hydraulic pistons and exposed cabling. The chest piece was a reinforced slab of carb plasteel, salvaged from a crashed AV, with a circular hole cut for the arc reactor. Friday, Tony said, wiping his forehead with a rag. Run the diagnostic on the servos. Hydraulics at 80% efficiency. The AI's voice chimed from a speaker rigged to the suit's collar. Response time is sluggish, boss. It is not the bleeding edge. It is the blunt instrument. Blunt works, Tony muttered. He walked over to a workbench where a small gun-shaped object lay disassembled. It was Skippy, the smart pistol V had found in an alley weeks ago. Tony picked up a micro-soldering iron. Now for the personality transplant. Hey, the gun chirped as Tony reconnected a wire. I was having a dream about a puppy. Why does my logic core feel like it just drank an espresso? I removed the pacifist inhibitions and updated your targeting algorithm, Tony said, snapping the casing back on. He tossed the gun to V. Try it. V caught the weapon. Skippy, you good user. Unknown, Skippy said, then paused. Correction. User genius detected in vicinity. Lethal mode unlocked. Headshot proficiency increased by 400%. Let's murderize some bad guys. V looked at the gun, then at Tony. You made him polite but deadly efficiency, Tony said, turning back to the suit. Now help me with the greaves. The weight distribution is off. As V moved to lift a heavy plating sheet, the air in the garage shimmered. Johnny Silverhand materialized, leaning against the unfinished suit, his silver arm crossed over his chest. He looked at the armor with disgust. Look at it, Johnny, sneered, his voice echoing in V's head. He's building a coffin, V. A shiny metal coffin. This guy is everything wrong with the world. Tech power ego. He thinks he can hammer the world into shape. V grunted under the weight of the metal plate. He's helping us, Johnny. Is he? Johnny walked through the suit, his ghost eyes locking onto Tony. Ask him about his past, V. Ask the Merchant of Death how many people burned because of weapons with his name on them. He's not a hero. He's just a corpo with a guilty conscience. V bolted the plate into place, the impact wrench screaming. Tony. Tony looked up, sensing the shift in the room. Yeah, Johnny says you're a war criminal, V said bluntly. Says you signed your name on bombs. The garage went quiet. The hum of the ventilation fan seemed to get louder. Tony set down the wrench. He didn't get angry. He didn't deflect. He walked over to a bucket of water and washed the grease from his hands, the water turning black. He's right, Tony said softly. Johnny blinked, surprised by the admission. Tony dried his hands and leaned against the workbench, looking at the raw steel of the Mark NC suit. I used to build things that killed people I never met from miles away. I thought I was protecting the future. I was just selling it to the highest bidder. He looked up, his eyes meeting V's. That's why I stopped building bombs. And that's why I built the suit. I signed my name on the destruction. Now I sign my name on the shields. If I'm going to fight, I'm going to be the one taking the hit. Silence stretched between them. Johnny stared at Tony. For a moment, the sneer vanished. The rocker boy looked at the billionaire, seeing the scars, not just physical, but the weight carried in the shoulders. Huh, Johnny, muttered the glitch in his voice, smoothing out. At least he owns it. Saburo Arasaka would never admit he's a monster. Friday, Tony said, breaking the tension. It's time to ring the doorbell. Sir, we need to draw them out. We can't sneak into Mikoshi if we don't know where the access points are. We need to make Arasaka panic. Panic makes people sloppy. Tony walked to a computer terminal he had rigged up to the city's subnet. I'm going to hijack their ad space. V stepped forward, alarmed. Tony, wait. If you hack the Arasaka feed, they'll trace it. They'll know exactly where we are. That's the point. Tony said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. I'm not hiding anymore. He hit enter. Across Night City, the massive holographic billboards shifted. The geisha eating noodles, the ads for organic apples, the news feeds, they all flickered and died. In their place, a simple, stark symbol appeared. A stylized Iron Man helmet drawn in rough red pixels. A voice broadcast over the city, overriding every speaker, every radio, every cyberdeck. Attention, Arasaka. This is Tony Stark. You have something of mine. A concept. The idea that you can own a soul. I'm coming to delete your database. Consider this your 2-minute warning. V stared at the screen. You just kicked the hornet's nest. I kicked the whole tree, Tony corrected. He turned to the suit. Suit up. We've got company. It didn't take 2 minutes. It took 90 seconds. The ground shook. Outside the garage, the alleyway erupted in light as heavy floodlights cut through the rain. The screech of metal on asphalt tore through the air. Hostiles detected, FRIDAY announced. Arasaka Heavy Response Team. 3 Centaur-class mechs, 24 infantry. Get behind me, Tony commanded as the garage door blew inward. The explosion shredded the metal shutter, sending shrapnel flying. V dove behind a heavy workbench, activating the arm-mounted projectile launcher. Smoke filled the room. Through the haze, the massive silhouette of an Arasaka Centaur mech stepped in. It was 12 feet of military polymer, its Gatling gun spinning up. Target identified. The mech boomed. Terminate. The mech opened fire. The Gatling gun roared, tearing apart the equipment, the tools, the walls. Then a metallic clang reverberated through the garage. The Mark NC stepped out of the shadows. It was slow, heavy, every step shaking the concrete floor. The bullets pinged harmlessly off the thick, unpainted cargo plate chest. Tony didn't have flight stabilizers. He had hydraulic pistons. He didn't have repulsors. He had torque. Tony caught the barrel of the mech's Gatling gun with one massive clawed hand. The servos whined a sound like a dying turbine. My turn, Tony's voice boomed from external speakers, distorted and deep. He twisted. The metal of the gun barrel shrieked and snapped. Tony stepped in, driving a pneumatic punch into the mech's central sensor array. The impact was visceral metal, crunching on metal oil spurting like blood. The Centaur mech toppled backward, crushing the infantry behind it. V move, Tony shouted. They spilled out into the alley. It was a kill zone. Two more Centaur mechs stood at the end of the street, flanked by soldiers. Missiles hissed from the shoulder launchers of the rear mech. Incoming V screamed. Friday rearranged the photons, Tony yelled. He raised his left arm. He hadn't just built armor. He had hacked the environment. He pointed at the massive holographic billboard above the alley, an advertisement for Chromanticore soda, featuring a giant glowing purple can. The hologram didn't just flicker, it solidified. Tony's interface seized control of the hard light projectors lining the street. The purple light of the advertisement condensed the photons packing together until they formed a shimmering, translucent barrier. The missiles slammed into the giant soda can. Boom, boom, boom. The explosions rippled across the hard light surface, harmlessly dissipating. The soldiers paused, stunned. They were shooting at a commercial that had just become a wall. Hard light. Tony panted inside the suit, the heat rising. Primitive, but effective. He dropped the shield and charged. The Mark NC couldn't fly, so it ran like a linebacker. Tony plowed through the smoke shoulder, checking the second mech into a brick wall. The building shook, dust raining down. He wasn't fighting with finesse. He was fighting with mass. He ripped a lamppost out of the concrete and swung it like a baseball bat, sweeping 3 soldiers off their feet. V was moving in his wake, Skippy singing a cheerful tune with every lethal shot. Bad guy down fun, but the suit was taking a beating. Armor plates were dented. Hydraulic fluid was leaking from the left knee. The third mech locked onto a group of civilians cowering in a noodle shop storefront. The pilot raised a rocket launcher. No V shouted too far away to stop it. Tony saw it. He didn't have time to hack. He didn't have time to calculate. He fired the jump jet's crude methane thrusters, welded to his calves. The suit launched sideways, not gracefully but violently. Tony landed between the mech and the civilians just as the rocket fired. He caught the warhead. It wasn't a catch, it was a collision. The rocket detonated against the Mark NC's chest plate. The explosion engulfed Tony in a ball of fire. The force threw him back, slamming him into the noodle shop's facade. Silence followed the blast. The smoke cleared. Tony was still standing. The chest plate was black and glowing cherry red. The arc reactor flickered wildly. But the civilians behind him were untouched. Tony groaned, the sound amplified by the suit's speakers. He looked at the mech pilot, who was frantically trying to reload. "Is that all you got?" Tony growled. He raised his right arm. The repulsor was a modified microwave emitter channeled through a focusing lens. He fired. An invisible beam of concentrated heat cooked the mech's ammunition instantly. The mech exploded from the inside out, a catastrophic failure of its own ordnance. The remaining soldiers routed, disappearing into the dark alleys. Tony stood amidst the wreckage, steam hissing from the joints of his suit. The neon sign of the noodle shop buzzed overhead, reflecting off the scorched, unpainted steel of his shoulders. He looked like a guardian demon of the industrial age. V holstered Skippy and walked over, kicking a piece of debris aside. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the familiar ache of the relic. "You're crazy," V said, breathless. "You actually caught a rocket." The faceplate of the Mark NC suit hissed open. Tony's face was covered in sweat and soot. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were bright, manic, with the high of survival. "I didn't catch it," Tony wheezed. "I just aggressively intercepted it." He stumbled, the suit's weight suddenly too much. V caught his arm, steadying him. They sat down on the curb, the ruined mech burning in front of them. V reached into a pocket and pulled out a bottle of synthetic water. V cracked the seal and handed it to Tony. "Here," V said. "Hydrate. You look like you're about to rust." Tony took the bottle, his metal gauntlet clinking against the plastic. He took a long drink, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Not bad," Tony said, looking at the water. "Tastes like recycled disappointment." It's Night City, Tap V, said a small, genuine smile touching their lips. Best you're gonna get. Not bad for garbage, Tony corrected, patting the scorched metal of his leg. Johnny appeared, sitting on top of the burning mech wreckage. He looked down at Tony, then at V. He didn't say anything snarky. He just adjusted his sunglasses. The subnet data came through during the hack, Tony said, his voice serious again. I know where Mikoshi is, and I know why the signal is so strong. Why? V asked. Because they aren't just storing souls, V, Tony said, staring into the fire. They're trying to merge them. They're poking the black wall, and if they poke too hard, nothing is going to keep the monsters out. V looked up at the sky. The warning Tony had broadcast was gone, replaced by the flickering ads again. The city had already moved on. But the silence in the alley felt heavy. They had survived the first wave, but they had just told the devil exactly where to find them. The Arasaka Industrial Park was a fortress of silent concrete and sweeping searchlights nestled on the edge of the polluted waterfront. The rain here tasted like copper and oil. Tony Stark did not do stealth well. Not in this suit. Clang, hiss, thud. Every step of the Mark NC was a tectonic event. The hydraulic pistons hissed loudly with every compression, and the heavy cargo plating groaned against the wet asphalt. Your loud V whispered over the comms, crouching behind a stack of shipping containers 50 yards ahead. V moved like a shadow optical camo shimmering in the rain. I am currently driving a forklift that I turned into a tuxedo. Tony's voice crackled back, sounding annoyed. Stealth was not in the design specs. Durability was. Besides, if they hear me, they aren't looking at you. They were inside the perimeter. The target was Warehouse 7, the cooling hub for the local Arasaka subnet. If the data Tony intercepted was right, this was where the hardline connection to Mikoshi was physically grounded. V paused by a side door, hacking the keypad. The wire from V's personal link glowed red, then green. We're in, V murmured. Inside the warehouse was a cavern of humming servers and suspended walkways. It was dimly lit by red emergency strips. V crept forward, pistol raised. Skippy the smart gun hummed happily in V's grip. New location discovered. Skippy chirped, his volume uncomfortably high. Warehouse probability of finding rats, 88%. Probability of finding bad guys, 99%. Shh, V hissed, tapping the gun's casing. Skippy mute mode. Muting fun mode. Skippy replied sullenly. V stopped near a cooling fan, catching breath. The stress of the infiltration was wearing thin. Skippy, do you ever worry about what you are? Just a tool, just code. Tony was catching up, his heavy footsteps echoing distantly. But V looked down at the gun. Philosophical query detected, Skippy replied. His holographic avatar, a simple bullet with a smiley face, bobbed. I am a tool, but tools have purpose. My purpose was to maim. Now my purpose is to protect user V. Is that not an upgrade? V blinked. Yeah, I guess it is. Stark recompiled his logic core, Johnny Silverhand said, leaning against a server rack. He looked bored, but his eyes were scanning the catwalks above. Gave the little murder Tamagotchi a conscience. Cute. Movement FRIDAY's voice cut through the comms. Thermal spike, 12 o'clock, high. Tony stomped into the main aisle, looking up. The Mark NC's headlamp cut through the gloom. Show yourself. From the shadows of the rafters, a figure dropped. It wasn't a soldier. It was a blur. Oda Sandayu landed silently in front of Tony. He was Arasaka's Grim Reaper, sleek, armored in ceremonial crimson and black, his face hidden behind a glowing red tech mask. From his forearms, thermal mantis blades snapped open, glowing with a terrifying, searing white heat. Stark Oda said, his voice a digital rasp. You are an error, and you're violating several safety protocols with those knives, Tony quipped, raising his gauntlets. Oda didn't laugh. He vanished. The Sandavistan speed implant kicked in. To V, Oda became a streak of red light, To Tony, he was a sensor ghost. Slash. Oda appeared instantly at Tony's flank. The thermal blades carved through the thick cargo plating of the Mark NC's thigh like a hot knife through butter. Hydraulic fluid sprayed out in a high-pressure jet. Warning. FRIDAY screamed. Mobility compromised. Tony swung a massive backhand, but Oda was already gone, ducking under the blow and slashing across the suit's midsection. Sparks showered the floor. The Mark NC was too slow. It was a tank fighting a hummingbird. I can't track him," Tony shouted, firing the repulsor wildly. The blue beam scorched the wall, missing Oda by feet. Oda realized the big suit was durable but clumsy. He turned his head, the red mask locking onto V. "Eliminate the accomplice," Oda stated. He charged V raised Skippy, firing a burst of smart bullets. Bad guy, bad guy. But Oda deflected them with a whirlwind of blade strikes, closing the distance in a heartbeat. V scrambled back, tripping over a cable. The red blades raised for the killing blow. Left duck, now. The voice wasn't Tony's. It was Johnny's screaming in V's skull with a ferocity that drowned out the fear. V didn't think. V obeyed the ghost. V rolled left a split second before the thermal blade gouged a trench in the concrete where V's head had been. Roll kicked the knee. "He's overextended," Johnny barked, standing right next to Oda, pointing at the gap in the assassin's stance. V kicked out boot, connecting with Oda's shin. It didn't hurt the armored assassin, but it broke his rhythm. Oda stumbled. "Tony, 11 o'clock, V screamed. Tony didn't hesitate. He trusted the call. He swiveled the torso of the Mark NC, ignoring the screaming metal of his damaged leg, and fired the repulsor gauntlet blindly at the coordinates. Boom! The blast caught Oda in the chest, lifting him off his feet and hurling him backward into a stack of server banks. The servers exploded in a shower of sparks and glass. Oda hit the ground, his thermal blades flickering. He tried to rise, but the damage to his internal systems was severe. He glared at them, then activated his optical camouflage, dissolving into shimmering air. Retreating FRIDAY confirmed. The silence that followed was heavy. The warehouse smelled of burnt plastic and hydraulic fluid. V sat on the floor chest, heaving. "We're alive." Johnny stood over V, looking down. He adjusted his sunglasses, hiding his eyes. "Don't get used to it." Johnny grumbled, his voice rough. "I just hate Oda more than I hate you. Guy's a preening peacock." V smiled weakly. "Thanks, Johnny." Yeah. Just get the data before the rest of the cavalry shows up." Tony limped over the left leg of the suit, dragging with a metallic screech. "That was close. I need better servos, or a neural interface that doesn't lag." He looked at V. "You moved before he struck. Good reflexes." "Had a spotter," V said, tapping the temple. Tony paused, looking at the empty air where Johnny stood. He gave a small, respectful nod to the ghost he couldn't see. They reached the main terminal. Tony jacked the suit directly into the port. FRIDAY, download everything, and keep the firewall up. The screens lit up. Walls of code cascaded down, red and black. Tony watched the data stream, his eyes widening behind the faceplate. "My God," Tony whispered. "What is it?" V asked, standing up and peering at the screen. "It's not just a prison," Tony said, pointing to a swirling graphic that looked like a storm wall. "Mikoshi isn't just storing the engrams, it's processing them. They're using the combined processing power of thousands of trapped human minds to run an algorithm." "What algorithm?" "A breach key." Tony said, his voice cold. "They're trying to crack the black wall. They want to harness the rogue AIs from the old net. They think they can control them, use them as weapons." The Blackwall Johnny stepped closer to the screen, horror dawning on his digital face. "Those idiots. That's not a door you open. That's a dam you pray never breaks." "If they succeed," Tony said, unplugging the jack, "it's not just Night City that falls. It's everything connected to a network. Global infrastructure collapse. Nuclear launches. Chaos. The Mark NC suit groaned, a warning light pulsing on the collar. Boss FRIDAY warned. Suit integrity is at 18%. Hydraulic fluid is critical. Power reserves are draining fast. We cannot sustain another engagement. Tony looked at the suit's arm. The metal was scorched, the wiring exposed. It was falling apart. We can't go back to the garage, V said. They know where it is now, and we don't have time to build another one. Tony looked at the data drive in his hand. Then he looked at V. We aren't just breaking in to save a few souls anymore, Tony said. We're breaking the cycle. If we don't stop Smasher and shut down Mikoshi tonight, there won't be a tomorrow to worry about. He turned toward the exit, dragging the crippled leg. Where are we going? V asked. Arasaka Tower, Tony said. The front door. If you're still listening, you're in the fight. And if you're still listening, you're in the fight now. The odds are bad. The suit is broken, and the boss level is waiting. Ow. The odds are bad. The suit is broken, and the boss level is waiting. Make sure you're subscribed, because the next act is going to hit harder than a gravity hammer. They walked out into the rain. The Mark NC was leaking oil, leaving a dark trail on the wet concrete. It was a broken machine marching toward a war it couldn't win. But inside the helmet, Tony Stark wasn't calculating the odds anymore. He was calculating the cost. Tony said over the comms as they reached the Hella. Drive fast. I'll need 5 minutes to reroute power from life support to the weapons systems. Life support, V asked, starting the engine. Overrated, Tony said. Let's go. The wind at 2,000 feet was a physical force screaming against the jagged metal of the Mark NC suit. Night City spread out below them like a circuit board on fire, a grid of neon violence and apathy. Tony Stark was not flying. He was falling with style, thrusters at maximum. Tony yelled over the roar of the wind. V, brace for impact. We're aiming for the executive terrace, V, clinging to the reinforced handle, welded to the suit's back, squeezed eyes shut. You call this a plan. I call it a dynamic entry. The methane jump jets on the suit's calves sputtered, coughing blue flame. They weren't designed for sustained flight. They were designed for short hops. They were burning out. Fuel critical, FRIDAY warned, initiating braking sequence. They slammed into the polished marble of the Arasaka Tower terrace. It wasn't a landing. It was a cratering. The suit skidded across the wet stone, tearing up ornamental gardens and smashing through a glass sculpture of a dragon. They came to a halt inches from the heavy blast doors of the upper atrium. Steam hissed from the suit's vents. Tony groaned, the sound distorted by the damaged vocalizer. Any landing you can walk away from is a miracle. V finished sliding off the suit's back and drawing Skippy. We're here. Mikoshi access is 2 floors down. The server room. Let's knock, Tony said. He didn't bother with the keypad. He grabbed the blast doors with both hands, the hydraulic servos screaming in protest, and ripped them off their hinges. They stepped into the silence of Arasaka Tower. It was sterile, cold, and quiet. Too quiet. The hallways were empty. No guards, no alarms. Just the soft hum of the building's reactor. I don't like this, Johnny said, flickering into existence ahead of them. He looked agitated, pacing back and forth. This smells like a setup. Sokka doesn't leave the front door open unless they want you to walk into the grinder. We don't have a choice, Tony said, limping forward. The left leg of the suit was dragging badly now. The knee joint fused from the Oda fight. Friday scanned for heat signatures. Interference FRIDAY replied, her voice trembling with a digital glitch. Sir, the interference is massive. It is not encryption. It is screaming. They reached the server room. It was a cavernous space filled with towering black monoliths, the server banks holding the digitized souls of the Secure Your Soul program. In the center of the room, bathing in the red light of the emergency strips, stood a figure. He was massive, a cyborg colossus. His body was almost entirely machine, a sleek, devastating frame of military-grade composite armor. Atom Smasher. He turned slowly, his optical sensors glowing a piercing red. Stark Smasher rumbled. His voice sounded like grinding stones. And the thief. You actually came. I like to keep my appointments, Tony said, stepping forward. He charged the repulsor gauntlet, the capacitor whining high and thin. We're here for the keys, Smasher. Hand them over and I won't turn you into a toaster. Smasher laughed. It was a hollow metallic sound. You think you are a threat? Look at you. You are wearing garbage. You are scrap metal pretending to be a god. And you, Tony shot back, are a human pretending to be a tank. Bad trade. Die, Smasher said. He moved. It wasn't like fighting Oda. Oda was fast. Smasher was an avalanche. He crossed the room in a blur of heavy metal and slammed into Tony. Crunch. The impact lifted the 1-ton Mark NC suit into the air and hurled it across the room. Tony crashed into a server bank, shattering it. Sparks rained down. Boss structural integrity compromised, chest plate critical. Tony tried to stand, but Smasher was there. The cyborg grabbed the Mark NC by the throat and lifted him up. Is this the Iron Man? Smasher mocked. He squeezed. The metal of the neck guard began to buckle. Soft. Weak. V now, Tony choked out. V popped out from behind a pillar, leveling Skippy. Eat lead, ugly, bam, bam, bam. The smart bullets sought the weak points in Smasher's armor joints, sensors, neck cables. But they just sparked and ricocheted. Smasher didn't even flinch. He backhanded the air without looking, the shockwave of his movement knocking V off balance. Then he turned his attention back to Tony. Smasher grabbed the Mark NC's right arm, the weaponized gauntlet. No, Tony gritted out, firing the repulsor point blank into Smasher's chest. The beam scorched the black armor, but Smasher just roared. With a sickening screech of tearing metal, Smasher ripped the arm off the suit. Wires snapped. Hydraulic fluid sprayed like arterial blood. Tony screamed. The feedback loop in the neural interface blinded him with white-hot pain. Smasher tossed the severed limb aside like a dry twig. Garbage, Smasher spat. He kicked Tony in the chest, sending him sliding across the floor to the edge of the central platform. Tony lay there, the suit sparking, the HUD flickering and dying. He couldn't move. The power couplings were severed. He was trapped in a dead metal coffin. Sir Friday's voice was a whisper, now terrified. The black wall. It is open. The screen surrounding the room turned from Arasaka red to a static-filled abyssal black. Strange, distorted faces began to push against the glass of the monitors. Screams echoed in the room, not audio but digital, vibrating in their teeth. They are not codes, Friday said. They are ghosts. V crawled across the floor, vision blurring. The relic malfunctioned violently. V coughed, tasting blood. Tony, V whispered. Johnny Silverhand stood over V, looking at the scene. He looked at Smasher, the monster who had killed him 50 years ago. Then he looked at Tony Stark, battered, bleeding, stripped of his weapon, lying in a pile of trash. And Tony was still moving. Inside the crushed helmet, Tony was blinking blood out of his eyes. His fingers were twitching, tapping against the inside of the thigh plate. He wasn't twitching from pain. He was typing. Friday. Tony whispered, his voice broken. Reroute. Reroute everything to the synthesis matrix. I am afraid, the AI whispered. So am I. Tony rasped. Let's be afraid later. Johnny watched him. The cynicism faded from the rocker boy's face. He saw the sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat. He's crazy, Johnny murmured to V, his voice filled with a strange new respect. He's completely out of his mind. But he's the kind of crazy this city needs. Smasher walked over to Tony. The floor shook with each step. He loomed over the fallen Avenger, casting a long, jagged shadow. We were back at the beginning. The hook, the cold open. Smasher raised his heavy metal boot, poised to crush the helmet like a soda can. This is the moment I thought we were dead. V's internal monologue echoed, fading into the static. Game over. Smasher looked down, his red eyes burning. Any last words, me? Tony stopped typing. He looked up through the cracked faceplate. He didn't beg. He grinned, teeth red with blood. Yeah, Tony whispered. Update complete. What? Smasher paused. FRIDAY, Tony shouted. Show them what a real upgrade looks like. Synthesis complete, the AI announced. Her voice was no longer glitching. It was clear, powerful, resonant, bleeding edge online. A sound like a thunderclap shattered the air. It wasn't an explosion of fire. It was an eruption of light. Gold light. Liquid metal poured out of the arc reactor on Tony's chest. It didn't move like machinery. It moved like living tissue, like golden blood. It flowed over the rusted, broken scrap of the Mark NC suit, consuming it, replacing it. It moved faster than thought. In the blink of an eye, the scrap metal was gone. Smasher stomped down. Clang. His boot didn't crush a helmet. It hit a surface that was harder than diamond. Tony caught the boot with one hand. His hand was no longer a welder's glove. It was sleek, streamlined, glowing with an internal golden energy. The armor formed around him, instantly red and gold, but sharper, fiercer, pulsing with nanotechnology that adapted in real time. Smasher's eyes widened. Nanotech impossible. Tony pushed. With a casual flick of his wrist, he threw the 2-ton cyborg backward across the room. Tony stood up. The Mark NC was gone. The Iron Man was back. But this wasn't the suit he had arrived in. This was something new. Something born from the desperation of Night City and the genius of a man who refused to rust. The bleeding edge armor hummed, floating inches off the ground. V watched vision clearing as the golden light flooded the room. The pain in V's head receded, pushed back by the sheer awe of the sight. Tony turned to Smasher, the faceplate snapping shut with a crisp, perfect seal. The eyes of the suit glowed a brilliant, piercing blue. You broke my toy, Tony said, his voice amplified, smooth, and terrifyingly calm. Now I'm going to break yours. The room didn't just smell of ozone anymore. It smelled of the future. Atom Smasher roared a sound of pure mechanical rage and unleashed his full arsenal. Shoulder-mounted rocket pods opened micro-missiles, shrieking across the server room. The heavy projectile cannon on his arm spun up, spitting depleted uranium rounds at 3,000 rounds per minute. It was enough firepower to level a city block. Tony Stark didn't dodge. He floated forward. The bleeding-edge armor didn't behave like metal. It behaved like water. As the bullets struck, the gold and red surface rippled, absorbing the kinetic energy and redistributing it instantly. The missiles impacted, blossoming into fire, but as the smoke cleared, Tony was already emerging, the armor re-knitting itself over his chest in a seamless flow of nanotechnology. Hardware. Tony's voice echoed calm and terrifyingly clear. It's so limited. You're fighting with gears and grease, Smasher. I'm fighting with math. Smasher charged, engaging his Sandevistan. He was a blur of chrome, aiming a piledriver punch at Tony's head. Tony didn't block. The nanosuit simply shifted. The helmet dissolved and reformed inches to the left, letting Smasher's fist punch through empty air. Before Smasher could recover, Tony's arm liquefied and hardened into a dense, spiked mace. Crack. The counterstrike hit Smasher in the optical sensor array. The cyborg stumbled back, metal crunching. Impossible. Smasher snarled, his targeting systems glitching. You are soft. You are meat. I'm an idea. Tony corrected. He raised both hands. And ideas are bulletproof. Friday multitasking protocol. Keep the suit on autopilot for combat. I need to focus on the code. Route confirmed, boss. The AI replied, isolating the soul killer demon. Tony began to fight 2 battles at once. Physically, he was dismantling the most dangerous solo in Night City. He ducked under a thermal blade, his own thrusters flaring to deliver a supersonic uppercut that lifted Smasher off the floor. Digitally, his eyes were darting across a HUD. Only he could see, rewriting the architecture of the Arasaka mainframe. Protocol Omega. Tony shouted, blasting Smasher with a unibeam that melted the cyborg's chest plating. Override the admin privileges. I want those servers unlocked. V watched from behind the shattered pillar, mesmerized. It wasn't a fight. It was an exorcism. The clumsy, desperate struggle of the last few days was gone. This was the Avenger. This was the level of power that stared down gods. He's not just hitting him. Johnny's ghost whispered, standing next to V. The rocker boy took off his sunglasses, his digital eyes wide. He's rewriting him. Smasher, realizing he was outmatched in brute force, tried to scramble toward the main server bank. If I go down, the souls go with me. I will purge the drive. No, Tony said. The armor shifted again. The nanoparticles detached from Tony's back, swarming into the air like a cloud of golden dust. They didn't attack Smasher. They connected to the server ports. Friday interface with the Mikoshi data. Projected. External speakers. Hollow emitters at maximum. Projecting FRIDAY said. The room changed. The red emergency lights were drowned out by a soft blue luminescence. The nanotech particles suspended in the air began to form shapes, faces, bodies. They were the engrams, the stolen souls of Mikoshi. Hundreds of them filled the room, ghostly, translucent figures standing in the air. Men in suits, netrunners in jumpsuits, punks, mothers, thieves. They weren't just static images. They were memories looping in the space between the combatants. Smasher froze. He was surrounded by the people he had killed. What is this? Smasher bellowed, swiping at a hologram of a young woman. His claw passed through her. It's your legacy, Tony said, stepping through the crowd of ghosts. You collected them like trophies. You thought they were just data. But data remembers. Tony clenched his fist. The ghosts seemed to turn, staring at Smasher. The psychological weight of it hit the cyborg. For the first time, the monster hesitated. You traded your humanity for hardware, Tony said, stopping inches from Smasher. The faceplate retracted, showing Tony's human eyes burning with judgment. Bad trade. Smasher screamed and lunged, a desperate, flailing strike. Tony caught Smasher's wrists. The nanosuit flowed over Smasher's arms, binding them, fusing the joints. Disassemble, Tony commanded. The suit obeyed. The nanobots ate into Smasher's cybernetics, locating the release, latches, the power couplings, the bolts. In seconds, Smasher's arms fell off. Then his legs. Then the heavy armor plating on his torso. It wasn't a kill. It was a dismantling. Smasher crashed to the floor, reduced to a torso, and a head leaking fluid and sparking helplessly. The invincible dragon of Arasaka was just a nugget of meat and metal on the cold floor. Tony didn't look at him again. He looked at the screens. The black wall was still screaming. The digital abyss was widening, red lightning arcing from the monitors to the server banks. The dam is breaking, V shouted, stumbling forward. Tony, the AIs. I'm going in, Tony said. The suit sealed up again. V, guard the body. Don't let him reboot. Tony placed his hand on the main server terminal. The nanotech spiked into the port. Diving. The world dissolved. Tony wasn't in the room anymore. He was in the net. It was a landscape of geometric abstraction, a horizon of neon grids and towering data spires. But the sky was wrong. The sky was a wall of black static, shifting and roaring like a living ocean. Tentacles of red code were lashing out, trying to pull the spires down. And standing on the edge of the digital cliff was Johnny Silverhand. The rocker boy looked different here. Sharper, higher resolution. He was holding his Malorian pistol, staring at the approaching wall of doom. "You're late," Stark Johnny said without turning around. "End of the world is starting." Tony materialized beside him. In the net, he wasn't wearing the armor. He was wearing a simple suit, tailored and sharp. He looked at the black wall. "It's not the end," Tony said. "It's a patch job." He raised his hand. The code flowed from his fingertips, complex streams of gold syntax that flew toward the black wall. It was a repair algorithm, weaving the digital fabric back together, reinforcing the ice, pushing the rogue AIs back into the deep. "You're good," Johnny admitted, watching the wall stabilize. "Better than Alt. Better than anyone I've seen." "I learn fast," Tony said. He turned to Johnny. "Now about you." Johnny stiffened. "Here it comes. The deletion. I'm just a virus to you, right?" Tony shook his head. "To Arasaka, you're property. To the system, you're a glitch. But I don't work for the system." Tony waved his hand, and a window materialized in the air between them. It showed two paths. Path A, I delete you. You cease to exist. V lives, but a part of them dies with you. Johnny scoffed. And Path B, Path B. Tony said, I upload you to a blank slate, a separate partition. I detach you from V's neural network, but I don't wipe you. You get stored on a secure drive. A second chance. You can exist in the net, or we can find you a body, a synth frame. But there's a condition. Condition: no nukes, Tony said sternly. No killing innocents to make a point. You want to burn the system? Fine. Burn it with truth. Burn it with art. But you stop being a terrorist. Johnny looked at the golden code, then back at the black wall, and finally at Tony. He adjusted his sunglasses. A smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. You're a Boy Scout, Stark Johnny said. But I guess I'm tired of being dead. Is that a yes? Yeah, Johnny said. Fine, but I'm keeping the sunglasses and the guitar. Deal. Tony snapped his fingers. The world turned white. Back in the server room, the screens flashed once a blinding gold light, and then went dark. The screaming stopped. The red lightning vanished. The heavy silence of the tower returned, broken only by the whimpering of the dismantled atom smasher. The nanotech retracted from the console. Tony stepped back, the helmet peeling away, to reveal a face drenched in sweat, but victorious. Friday, Tony asked. Blackwall sealed, Boss FRIDAY reported. Protocol Soulkiller neutralized. All engrams have been partitioned and encrypted. They are safe. They are free. V slid down the wall, the headache finally truly gone. The biomonitor on V's wrist chirped. The red line of the relic malfunction turned green. Quiet, V whispered, touching the temple. It's quiet. Tony walked over and offered a metal hand to the merc. We did it, kid. Tony said, a tired smile breaking through. We saved the city, or at least, we kept it from falling off the edge. Watson used to be a graveyard of flickering sodium bulbs and shadows where things with teeth waited. But tonight, the slums of Kabuki Market were bathed in a new kind of light. It wasn't the harsh, strobe flash neon of the corporations. It wasn't the aggressive red of Arasaka or the sterile blue of Militech. It was a warm, steady golden hum. In the center of the old district, grafted onto the ruins of a collapsed power station, sat the gift. It was a macro-scale arc reactor, 3 stories tall, pulsing with a silent, limitless energy. Tony Stark hadn't just beaten the bad guy. He had rewired the grid. For the first time in history, the poorest district in Night City had free, clean power. The shadows had nowhere left to hide. 3 weeks had passed since the fall of Arasaka Tower. The impact was seismic. When Tony Stark purged the Mikoshi servers, he didn't just free the souls. He triggered a cascading financial collapse of the Arasaka Corporation. Their stock plummeted when the truth about the Secure Your Soul program leaked that it was a prison, not a paradise. The board was in shambles. The grip of the megacorp on the city had loosened just enough for the people to breathe. But V wasn't thinking about stock prices or revolutions. V was thinking about onions. The small food stall was tucked into a corner of the market, under the warm glow of the new reactor. It was humble, just a counter, a grill, and 4 stools. The sign above the counter was hand-painted, "The Afterlife Grill." V chopped vegetables with a rhythm that had nothing to do with combat. There was no relic malfunction, no glitch in the vision, no blood coughing into the sink. Just the smell of frying garlic and the sizzle of synthetic meat. "Order up," V called out, sliding a plate across the counter. A customer, an old woman with a cybernetic eye, took the plate with a smile. "Bless you, V. It smells real." "It's the spices," V said, wiping hands on a rag. "Trade secret." The stool at the far end of the counter spun around. A figure sat there tuning an acoustic guitar. He wasn't a ghost anymore. He was chrome and carbon fiber. Johnny Silverhand sat in a high-end synth frame body. It was sleek, industrial, and painted a matte black, but the left arm was pure polished silver. He wore his signature aviators and a leather vest that looked suspiciously like the one he wore in 2023. "You're using too much paprika," Johnny drawled, strumming a chord. The sound was crisp acoustic analog. "Ruins the texture." V laughed. It was a genuine sound, light and unburdened. "You don't even have taste buds, Johnny. You have chemical sensors." "I have refined chemical sensors," Johnny corrected, looking over his sunglasses. "And I'm telling you, the rebellious spirit of the dish is being stifled by the spice." V shook their head, leaning on the counter. "You know, for a guy who wanted to burn the city down, you look pretty comfortable sitting in it." Johnny stopped playing. He looked out at the market, at the kids playing soccer under the arc reactor's light, at the lack of scavengers in the alley. "I didn't want to burn the people," Johnny said softly. "Just the cages they lived in. And, well, the cage is a little bigger now." A low hum different from the reactor descended from the sky. The wind picked up, scattering napkins across the counter. The crowd in the market parted, looking up in awe. The bleeding edge armor floated down, silent as a thought. It didn't slam into the ground this time. It touched down with the grace of a feather. The nanotech retracted, flowing back into the housing unit on the chest of the man standing there. Tony Stark looked better. The bruises had faded. He was wearing a sharp suit again, though he had traded the dress shoes for heavy combat boots, a concession to the night city streets. "Smells good," Tony said, walking up to the stall. "Is that shawarma? Please tell me you figured out the shawarma recipe. I've been craving it since New York." "Synthetic beef wrap," V said, grinning. "But I can add extra hot sauce. I'll take 2. Tony said, sitting on the stool next to Johnny. Tony looked at Johnny's new mechanical body. The synth frame holding up no rejection issues. "It's decent," Johnny grunted, inspecting his silver hand, a little stiff in the knuckles. "And I still think you put a limiter on the volume output of my vocalizer." "I did," Tony admitted shamelessly. "You're welcome, humanity." V plated the wraps and set them down. Tony took a bite, closing his eyes. "Not bad," Tony chewed thoughtfully. "A little heavy on the paprika, but I respect the boldness." "Told you," Johnny muttered. Tony swiveled on the stool to face V. The playfulness in his eyes dimmed, replaced by a warm seriousness. "My ride is here," Tony said. "Friday finally cracked the dimensional frequency. We found the way back. Pepper and Morgan are probably freaking out." V felt a pang of sadness, but it was the good kind, the kind that comes from knowing you're going to miss a friend. "You're leaving?" V asked. "Got a world of my own to save," Tony said. "But I'm leaving the lights on for you. The reactor runs on a self-sustaining isotope loop. It'll outlast Arasaka. It'll outlast all of us." "You did more than that," V said, gesturing to the peaceful market. "You gave us a second chance. You reset the game." Tony stood up, brushing crumbs from his jacket. He looked at the city skyline, the towering mega-buildings that still loomed in the distance. They were still there, still dangerous, but they didn't look invincible anymore. You know, Tony said when I first crashed here, I thought this place was a scrapyard. Just metal and bad attitude. Johnny stood up too, slinging the guitar over his back. And now Tony smiled. Now I see what it really is. It's a forge. It breaks you down to see what you're actually made of. He looked at Johnny, the former terrorist turned guardian. He looked at V, the dying merc turned chef. Night City is chrome, Johnny said, repeating the old adage of the street. Yeah, Tony nodded, tapping the arc reactor on his chest. But chrome rusts. Character doesn't. FRIDAY's voice chimed from the suit. Boss, the Einstein-Rosen bridge is stabilizing. We have a 3-minute window. Time to fly, Tony said. He stepped back. The bleeding edge armor flowed out, encasing him in the red and gold skin of the Iron Man. The faceplate snapped shut. Tony's voice amplified. If you ever invent a better recipe, signal me across the multiverse. I'll come running. Goodbye, Tony Phi whispered. With a sonic boom that rattled the pans on the grill, Iron Man shot into the sky. He climbed higher and higher, a streak of gold fire against the smog, until he vanished into a sudden swirling rift of blue energy in the upper atmosphere. The rift closed. The sky was empty again, but the light in the market remained. V stood there for a long moment, watching the spot where he had disappeared. Johnny leaned against the counter, picking at his guitar again. He was a show-off, Johnny said, but there was no bite in it. He was a hero, V corrected. Maybe Johnny shrugged, but he was right about one thing. What's that? Johnny pointed to the sign above the stall. The paprika. V laughed, grabbing a towel to wipe down the counter. Shut up and play something, Silverhand. Customers are waiting. Johnny smiled, a real smile on a face made of metal, but animated by a soul that was finally free. He struck a chord, a major key, bright and hopeful. V's voiceover. We thought he was just another suit, another rich tourist crashing into our nightmare. The camera pans up away from the stall rising above the market. We see the golden glow of the arc reactor pushing back the darkness of Watson. We see the streets filled with people who aren't looking over their shoulders. But he didn't give us weapons. He didn't give us eddies. He gave us a choice. The shot widens to show the whole of Night City. The Arasaka Tower still stands dark and scarred, but the slums are shining brighter than the corporate peaks. The city is still tough. The core are still hungry. But for the first time in a long time, the future looks bright. Tony left a light on in Night City, but there are a million other dark timelines out there waiting for a fix. Which universe needs an arc reactor next? Gotham, the Wasteland. Drop your vote in the comments below. Building the future is hard. Burning it is easy. Choose wisely. And if you want to see the next revolution, make sure you're subscribed.